Hi you guys, it's Miss Arneson, and we're gonna talk about another couple of the elements of art, and then we'll practice some exercises with them. So this is a set of notes. I want you to have some piece of paper out. You're gonna write some notes. They're very short. You can even write them on your same page that you used for line. If you just want to continue on, you could write today's date and then write your new notes. There's not very many notes, but there is going to be some thinking at the end about some various artworks. So today we're going to talk about shape and form. Okay, so first let's talk about shape. A shape is a space enclosed by a line or edges. A space enclosed by a line or edges. And it's going to be two-dimensional. So it's going to be flat. It's just going to be like a drawing on a paper. So I was trying to find some really old emojis, like the emojis that were on my first phone. And I couldn't even find them on the internet. I guess I searched for the wrong things. I'm sure they're there. But the first emojis that we had were like really, really flat. They were just shapes without any like shading or anything on them. And they were like really simple designs. So shapes are going to be flat. That's a really big piece of information to remember about shapes. Then when we get to forms, here's the definition of form. It is a three-dimensional shape. So when you take a circle and you pump it full of air to make it 3D, then you get a sphere. So these are some emojis that I found that look almost like they could be buttons to me or something. They are three-dimensional looking. So they have shading on them. There's little hearts that are floating around in front of the little faces, and so you can tell that these are supposed to be 3D forms rather than two-dimensional shapes. Okay, so just like there's types of lines and qualities of lines, there's going to be qualities of shapes and forms. So um, the terminology changes a little bit. Geometric is the same to represent like the classic shapes that you think of with the angled sides. So if we have 2D shapes that are geometric, then here's just a list of them. If we're talking about 3D shapes that are geometric, we're changing any of these into a three-dimensional form. And so here's some examples like a cuboid is what they're calling this, but sometimes they would call this a rectangular prism. So sometimes they have different names for these, but you can recognize them when you see them. Okay, now we had organic lines and geometric lines when we were talking about lines, but the name for the forms and the shapes that are more natural or organic is biomorphic. So we have to add this other term, but you can think of being able to use the term biomorphic and organic in the same way because they're just describing the shapes and the forms that aren't like just your basic geometric shapes that you think of and you learn about in kindergarten. They're the more natural ones that don't really follow harsh edged rules. So here's where we're just going to be thinking about some artworks. So I have a series of pieces of art here that we're going to look at. And when we first look at it, I want you to think about, is this representing shapes or forms? So what do you guys think about this painting? It's definitely representing shapes, right? The edges of the work are really, really hard. And then there's also just like a bunch of squares and rectangles inside of it. I was looking at some coronavirus masks, and they actually have some that are inspired by this artist. But he's not like my favorite. I feel like he's cool because he's very recognizable. I showed you earlier one where he just uses these geometric shapes and primary colors, and so you can always recognize his work pretty easily. Okay, so here is another piece of art. What do you guys think, shape or form? Since this is a thing that's built in an environment, it's automatically going to be considered a form because it has a real three-dimensional shape. So when you're painting on something, you have to intentionally make something look 3D. But when you build something, make a sculpture, then it's automatically going to be a form because it really does have a three-dimensional shape. So this one looks like a house designed by the last artist we looked at. But it is not. It is an American artist named Lichtenstein, and he did a lot of really cool stuff if you want to look him up. Okay, next, um, what do you guys think about this one? Again, this is going to be form because it's actually built in an environment. You could walk up to it. Is it geometric or are we doing biomorphic things here? Geometric for sure. It's a cubes making up a pyramid. So it's forms, a bunch of forms making a bigger form that is geometric. This one's fun because it's very, very colorful. The shapes or forms. It's primarily shapes. Um, I don't even know like what it's supposed to be. It says the sunflower. Okay, so this is really abstracted, right? Because this is supposed to be the sunflower right here. So we assume this is some sort of vase. But there's not, even though there's a little bit of shading here to try to make it look more interesting, it definitely isn't trying to be three-dimensional. So we would go with shapes. And still, these are pretty geometric shapes, even though it's supposed to be representing a sunflower. Just so you guys know, when you're doing abstract art or looking at abstract art, the point of that is to take something and break it down into its basic shapes. So when you're looking at something like this, the artist purposefully did this. They purposefully broke down the shapes of the sunflower to make it look a lot more simplified. And so a lot of people really like abstract art and they want to put it in their house. I personally like some of it, but I'm definitely more of a fan of other schools of art. Okay, what do we got here? Shape or form? Form. And is this an organic or a biomorphic form, or is it a geometric form? For sure it is biomorphic. So I don't know what this is supposed to be. Sometimes you can look at the title and then tell what it's supposed to be. No, this is in French, so I really don't know what it means. Okay, so here's a Vincent van Gogh. So Vincent van Gogh is one of my favorites. I just really like all of his work because it's pretty. Well, it's not all pretty, but it's a lot. A lot of it is really pretty. Even when he was like super depressed and he was making art that for him represented his depression, it still looks beautiful. And so I don't know. I really like his stuff. So what do we have? Form or shape? I'm going to go with shape because this is flat. It's not trying to be three-dimensional. And what do you guys think about the types of shapes? Are they biomorphic? I'd say definitely biomorphic. There is a vase which has some kind of like sphere-like qualities to it, but overwhelmingly with the color on the wall, you have a whole bunch of more biomorphic shapes and also these organic lines. Okay, so Picasso didn't only do things that were paintings. He also did some sculpture and worked in some other media. And this is one of his sculptures. So if it's a sculpture, if it's an object, it's automatically going to be about form. And here he's abstracted a face, right? He has broken it down into more geometric shapes, but it's still like not, you couldn't say it's a sphere or a cube. And so it's definitely still going to be counting as biomorphic. So this one I found, and I really like how the shapes are shown here. So even though this is one man here, and there's I think a woman right here and another man right here, um, they've made all the parts of their body into shapes that they're kind of like pasting together. And it is a collage of paper with some paint on it as well. So I feel like this is a really cool way to think about putting shapes together to make a bigger picture. All right, that was all. So now you're going to go ahead and continue on this lesson. I hope you have a good day.